Okay, so I'm going to do it and breathe for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I'll say like, hey. Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
So, hey, welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sandy, Writings, Matt's wife, and this is Adrianne.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Adrianne Hayes, and I'm Eric's wife. So they're usually the ones sitting here doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, in these exact spots, too.
Yeah, we could do like a morph. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're so excited to have you here, and thank you so much, Adrianne. Adrianne spoke on Esther this morning, and we're so excited for this new series that's starting on the women who gave us Jesus. And I just personally think that's such an amazing topic because I don't know that many stories about women in the Bible, except like the main, like, okay, Mary and then the other Mary. So I'm so excited, and so looking forward. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So real briefly, do you want to just give us a little quick, like, what the sermon was about today?
Yeah. So today, kind of what I was asked to speak about was the story of Esther, which is, Esther is like 10 books, 10 chapters of a book. And so there's kind of a lot of information to talk about. So I kind of did an overview of the story of Esther. So Esther is a story in the Old Testament. And often it's called a diaspora story. And so that means that it's a story of God's people in exile. So this is not when they're, in Jerusalem, they are still in exile. This is, we learned like that they could have, that a little bit before this, King Cyrus had actually allowed Jews to return back to Jerusalem. But during Esther, this is a group of people then that we're learning about who haven't gone back. And so the other thing that that Eric had asked, and all of us that are going to be sharing in the next few weeks, is how did this woman, what do we see in each of these women that points us to Jesus? And so I think for Esther, obviously, the story is that Esther saved her people. And so ultimately we see that in the future, that Jesus saves us in a more eternal way, right? Forever, permanently. But also just Esther's courage and her faith in God. Although God is never actually mentioned in the book of Esther, which is kind of an interesting part of it. And so, if you haven't read through the book of Esther, I think it's hard for us as believers when we do read it. I think we see God in the book, even though his name isn't there, because some of the things that seem like coincidences in the book, we can kind of see that God was in those things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Wow, that's so great. And if you have time, please go in and watch the whole sermon. We'll put the banner at the end of the video. But I really love how you taught through the story and gave context because you're a teacher, right?
I do. I teach, I homeschool my kids, and I have started through that kind of teaching science classes to kids. And so I teach a lot about like famous scientists and inventors. So I love researching people's lives. And so it's cool to kind of do that in the same way with Esther.
That was perfect.
Yeah, so that was cool.
Cool. So was there anything that you wanted to share that you wish you had more time to share in the message, or anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think the few different things were, just looking at like what was happening with God's people leading up to the book. So the fact that this group of people, so we know that God's people were in exile. Some of them returned to Jerusalem. So for whatever reason, and we don't have answers, it's more questions than answers, like why is this group of people, did they choose not to go back? So this is a group of people then that to some degree are more assimilated, with the people in Persia. And so we don't really hear like we do with other stories in the Bible, like for, Daniel, like refuses to eat and is like, following food laws. So we don't get any of that in Esther. Like, obviously she was able to hide her being Jewish while she was in the palace. And there, at the same time, though, there had to have been markers that the people were Jewish, because then when the edict comes from Haman, who's like the kind of evil villain, that they're going to kill all the Jews, there had to have been something about them that would make them identifiable to that.
Yeah.
So we don't exactly know what's happening with this group of people. And so that kind of almost more speaks to our circumstance where we're kind of, we're believers, followers of Jesus in a world that is not necessarily that way.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of more applicable to us and what our life is like. And so I think that's one of the things. The other thing I mentioned, which is another kind of like more, we can just ponder what it would have been like, that the Jews, because of the timing of when the edict went out, and Haman it says he rolls a die or casts lots would be another way to say it, to decide on when the Jewish people are going to be killed. And it's actually marked for like 12 months in the future. So that's crazy that the people had to know that this was coming.
Yeah.
So that's almost, like for any of us, it's like kind of worse when there's something that's going to happen in the future. But then at the same time, because of the way that the calendar works and when this probably happened, they would have been finding out about this future thing during Passover. So we know, Passover, if we go back to like, Moses and a time of that, the time where God, all the firstborns, are going to be killed. And yet the people of God are told to put the blood over top of their door so that they can be passed over. Yeah. So, this is now what people are celebrating, that God had rescued the Jewish people. And yet now they're finding out during that celebration that this is going to happen. So are they comforted? Like looking back to how God had protected them in the past, like, do they have faith that God will, protect them? We don't really know, but it had to be kind of a crazy time for them to figure that out. So that's really interesting,
Yeah, definitely. And like you were saying in the message, when God is silent, he's still there.
Right. I was mentioning that there's like whole academic books written about the two books in the Bible. So Esther and Song of Songs are the two books that God's name is never mentioned. And so the only part of Esther she mentions when she's going to go and approach the king to ask for mercy for the people, that she's going to fast. So they don't even say pray, they say fast. But so that's kind of our closest to like having, God or like her relationship with God in the book. And so many people have done research of like why is God's name absent, and like the writer of Esther, who we don't really know who it was, like was it on purpose, that God's name isn't mentioned. But I think it is kind of what I came to, is that first of all, we don't know, but like we can say, is it because we're supposed to look for God, in the times where it's not clear. And so I think, because, I think maybe in past when I'd read Esther, years ago, it's like I may have not noticed that God wasn't mentioned because it just seems like it's so obvious that he was part of the story.
And so I felt goosebumps when that verse was shared about when she said, you'll fast, I'll fast. And she had just tremendous bravery. And she said, if I die, I die.
Right. Yeah.
So just like full surrender, full giving the whole situation to God. And you mentioned in your personal life how you felt like a similar way. Want to share about?
Yeah. So for me, and it's, definitely was one of the biggest ones, and that has led to more in the future. But essentially, I'm trying to even think how long ago. I don't know. Maybe almost 10 years ago, it would have been a time in our life when we were kind of in an unknown. Eric was looking for different ministry jobs. We had some hurtful situations at the church that we were at in Ohio. And, I'm really close to my family. I still am. And so, we lived really near them. We had 2 little kids. And so my plan for my life was that I was going to stay there, and we weren't going to go anywhere. And so that's not always how, things happen. And so I feel like God wasn't necessarily, there was silence in the fact that like when God doesn't answer your prayers in the way that you hope, and also just, disappointment of like, it seems like God isn't coming through for you, you know? And so eventually, and what I've learned since then is essentially saying the words like, God, make my will yours. Yeah. And that has been that was and has been life-changing, that if you really pray that your will would be what his will is for you, then like you're never going to be disappointed to some degree, because if we want what God wants, like that is, we know like his plans will happen, and so the blessings that came from, we were in Chicago for 7 years and had amazing circumstances. There's stories with our son Kieran, who we knew would need heart surgery, and just even the way that God worked that out, and the fact, one little story of it is that the surgeon that invented or like created the heart surgery for his specific heart defect was at the hospital in Chicago.
Wow.
And so kind of like Esther, you could be like, oh, well, that's a coincidence, but like, no, like it's not, like God, and so even that, like, as a mom saying, no matter what, like if that was the one reason that God had that we would live in Chicago, for Kieran to have surgery, and there was so much else to it, but little things like that. So seeing things like that as God's faithfulness and just the blessings that come with the faith, but you don't know the blessings until you take the step. And so I think that's the part, even with Esther saying like, okay, like if I die, I die. We know that like the end of the story is happy and there's celebration and all those things, but sometimes we have to take the step of faith first before we find out.
And that can be so hard, because in the moment, all you see is what's right in front of you.
Right.
And we don't know the outcome. And I think as humans, it's so hard it's hard for me anyway, to like let go of the control and the life that I want and what, I want to see happen. And so just giving it to God, and like you said, let my will be your will.
Yeah. And it doesn't, even the interesting thing about, I think the other point that I had today was like, sometimes we need to remember so we don't forget, because even though I could look at these like amazing things that God did for me, I can still be in times and be like, God, where are you? I can be asking the same questions. And so it's important to look back then at the ways that God was faithful, to trust him, because we're forgetful as humans. We don't remember the ways that God has come through for us in the past, and the way that he's present with us. And so all of us need to remember those things for sure.
Yeah. And I think storytelling is really a key part of that, because we only know like our life and all the history we have, but when we share with others, we can see like, wow, God moved in your life. God moved in your life, and it's like that community really helps us remember for sharing with each other.
Yeah, I love that we have that most weeks in service, that we have people sharing stories, and because even like you might be in a time where you feel like, where are you, God? But then when you hear like like other people sharing, it's like encouraging to all of us for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. What an amazing message. And I'm so glad that the Lord spoke to you and through you today. Yeah. So go ahead and click the banner and check out the rest of the sermon and series. All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.